In this video, I'm going to give you a breakdown of what the pros and cons are to living here in Salt Lake City in the year 2023. I'm super excited to jump into this video. We've had a lot of changes. If you've been following my channel for the last couple of years, you're going to notice a lot of changes here, and you're also going to notice a lot of things that are still kind of the same. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, I want to welcome you. I cover everything you need to know about what it's like to work, eat, sleep, live, and play here along the Wasatch Front in northern Utah. So make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date on what's happening. Now, as we jump into this, guys, if you're thinking about making that move here to Utah and you want to buy or sell real estate, I'd love to help you. I've helped people from all across the world make a move right here to Utah, and I want to hear from you. So reach out to me. My information's here on the screen. Like I said, whether you're looking to buy, sell, invest in real estate, maybe build a new home or talk to a builder about going that route, I'd love to help you. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this video here and take a look at some of the pros to living in Utah in this year. So number one on our list is going to be, it's still an amazing state to live. The access to the outdoors is absolutely unparalleled. You can go anywhere in the state and be able to do any outdoor activity that you want within about 30 to 60 minutes drive of the metro area. Whether you want to go hiking, you want to go skiing, you want to go rock climbing, you want to go mountain biking, whatever it is that you want to do, you can do it in about 30 to 60 minutes. So getting outdoors is incredibly easy. Over the past couple of months, we've even had a ton of snow here, which is leading to one of the best ski seasons that we've had in recent years. There's a lot of people who are getting up there every single day and are loving the snow that we're receiving here. So if you're interested in the outdoors, Utah is definitely going to be on the plus side for that feature. And that leads me right into number two here on our list. There's going to be lots of sunshine, especially in the winters, and you're also going to have mild winters. So in this one, we're talking about the weather that we actually get here in Utah. If you want to have access to all four seasons, Utah is one of the best places to do that. You're going to get long, hot summers, you're going to get cold, long winters, and then spring and fall are going to be a little bit shorter, but that's going to be your time period where you're going to get some nicer weather, right? You're going to have a lot of days in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, during those spring months and during the fall months. So the cool thing about that is that you get a lot of sunshine, especially in the summer, and you get a mild winter compared to a lot of other colder areas, right? If you're coming from, let's say any part of the northern United States, you're probably used to really cold temperatures, you're probably used to wind chill, and you're probably used to humidity. Out here in Utah, we have very little wind chill. It's rarely windy during the winter. Now, it can get windy, right? But it's just rare, especially compared to a lot of other areas. And also because we're lacking humidity in the air here, that cold air that you feel in the winter doesn't hit you quite as hard as it would in a place like, let's say, New York or Boston or, anywhere in the Northeast or even just upwards, towards Canada, right? So that humidity that's in the air can really bite deep, but luckily here in Utah, we don't have hardly any humidity, and so it doesn't feel as cold when you're outside during the winter. Next up, Utah is one of the most tax-friendly and business-friendly states out there. They charge a flat 5% income tax. It's actually just under 5% for your personal income tax. And then as far as, corporations and businesses are concerned, they're very favorable to these companies and to these business owners because they realize that, hey, these small business owners, these companies who are coming into our state and bringing jobs are the ones who are going to help continue to make our state grow and to hopefully make it a better place, right? So they're generally very business friendly, and a lot of people really appreciate that. If you're looking to, if you run your own business or you're self-employed or something like that, you're going to have a lot of advantages here in Utah than you would, compared to other states. And that kind of leads me right into the next point, which is that the job market is very good here in Utah. I just recently was doing some research on what's happening to the unemployment rate here in Utah. And as of right now, at the time of this recording, we're sitting at roughly 2.2% unemployment. This is over 1.5% lower than what it is on a national basis. So we're significantly lower on the unemployment rate, and that's a very healthy thing for the state overall. That means that the state is in, a lot of demand, there's a lot of growth happening, and there's a lot of people who have jobs and are going to continue to push the state forward. This also means that you're going to get a lot of high paying jobs, and it should be relatively easy to find a new job. There's going to be a lot of employers out there, a lot of corporations who are looking for talent and are willing to pay for that. So having that low unemployment rate as far as the job market is concerned is a very good thing. So let's talk a little bit about house prices, and then we're going to jump into some of the cons to living here in Utah. Now, when it comes to house prices, the first thing I want to mention is that house prices, as of the time of this recording, are coming down. If you watched any of my videos over the past couple of years, let's say a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I'd be telling you the opposite, right? I'd be saying, hey, home prices have been increasing like crazy and they're going nuts. But as of right now, home prices are actually coming down. We're down about 8 to 10% off of the peak from where we were back in, let's say May or June of 2022. But we're seeing those numbers continue to come down. And I think we're probably going to fall at least another 5 to 10%. That's my prediction right now. That might change in the future, but that's kind of roughly where I see it, for at least the next let's say 6 to 12 months. Looking 12 months plus into the future is very, very difficult to do because so much could change, right? If you said, hey, we'd be in this position right now 12 months ago, a year ago, you would, I don't think a lot of people would believe you. So with that being said, that's kind of where I think things are at right now. Compared to a lot of other major cities, buying a nice home here is completely doable, right? You can get entry-level homes for $350,000, $400,000, $500,000, and then you're going to have these, secondary move-up homes that are really homes that most people could live in for a very long time in that 600 to $1 million range, which again, yeah, I know it's still relatively expensive if you're coming from the Midwest, but if you're coming from like California or the Northeast or the Pacific Northwest, you're probably thinking, wow, that's a steal. I can get that type of home for $800,000. That's going to be crazy. That would cost $2 million in my market, right? So it's all relative, but still being able to buy a nice home is something that is still possible here in Utah with a relatively decent, home price overall. And that also kind of applies to rent, which is also coming down. We've seen rents come down about 5 to 10% from their all-time highs. This is something that was expected. Rents just got stretched so far beyond where they should have been because they rose so quickly, and now they're coming back down to more realistic numbers, which is a great reprieve. I think that's the right word. Respite from, I think that's respite. Yeah, break from, those high prices that we had. So that's kind of what we're seeing with housing. And right now, I'll be totally honest, even though I'm a real estate agent and I'd love to help you buy or sell a home, right now, if you're strictly looking at what you pay monthly, out of pocket, renting a home is cheaper than owning a home in today's market. Now, there are still advantages to buying a home, right? You're going to get tax advantages. You're going to be paying off the loan. It's going to be your house. Potentially that home could appreciate in value. There's a lot of benefits that come from being a homeowner, but if you're strictly looking at, hey, what does this cost me month over month? What's coming out of my bank account? Renting is definitely cheaper in this market right now. So that could open up a lot of opportunities for people who've been considering making a move. All right, now that with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into some of the cons for living here in Utah. I've got roughly 8 here on our list, and I want to talk about a couple of these together. But the first thing we're going to mention is that ski resorts are incredibly busy. So the first pro that I mentioned is that it's extremely easy to get outdoors here in Utah. Now, that also comes as a negative, right? Because if you go up to the ski resorts, we've had a ton of snow lately. The ski resorts are absolutely packed. The canyons are full, the parking lots are full, the lodges are full, the runs are full. So the ski resorts are extremely busy, and there's a lot of activity happening here in Utah. Utah is a very popular tourism state. So even if you're not going to the ski resorts, let's say you're going to the national parks, or you're going to Moab, or you're going to St. George, those are going to be incredibly busy as well. And that pushes prices up. And it also, I think kind of everybody, when they go on vacation, they want it to not be busy, right? Nobody says, hey, I want to go to the busiest place and wait in line, trying to get into this national park, right? Nobody wants that. They kind of want to have it all to themselves. So unfortunately, that is kind of a negative. Everybody's got the same idea, and that causes a lot of crowds to come to these areas. And on that note, I was down in Moab just a couple months ago, and the entrance line to Canyonlands National Park and Arches National Park was over an hour long just to get into the park. So it's pretty crazy to see how busy these places can get. And unfortunately, that's one of the downsides we have to mention here in this video. Next up on our list of cons for living in Utah is that the inversion and the overall air quality here in Utah is not great, right? I'll just flatly lay it out there. Unfortunately, we do have inversion in the winter, which is a complicated term to basically mean that we get a lot of smog that sticks around here in the valley. Salt Lake County actually sits in a bowl surrounded by mountains, right? You've got the Wasatch Mountains on the east side and the Ochre Mountains on the west side. So because of this, a lot of air will get trapped in there and it's not able to escape out of the valley, which unfortunately causes bad air quality. It usually happens during the winter. It is something that you can see and feel, especially if you're sensitive to, if you have some type of lung issues or, breathing issues, you're definitely going to feel it if you're outside when the inversion is really bad. But for your average day-to-day person, you're probably not going to, really notice it. It's not going to affect your day, but it's going to be something that you kind of pause and you go, oh man, like I'm breathing that in, right? And so these are the days where you want to try and stay inside, get your furnace filter changed, make sure it's doing its job to clean out as much of that, just junk in the air as much as possible, right? So that is mostly only during the winter. And, when it comes to the summer months, the summers actually have pretty good air quality. As long as there's no fires or anything in the air with, putting off smoke, the air quality in the summer is actually not too bad. But that is something I wanted to include on the cons here, is that we do have inversion, and the air quality here in Utah is not the best when you compare to other states. There's a lot of other states that will rank higher on overall air quality. So I just want to point that out. Next up, the nightlife here in Utah is lacking, right? Nightlife here in Utah is not something that Utah's not known for having nightlife, right? It's not a place you're going to go to party. It's not a place you're going to go to have all these entertainment options and just go have a blast of a time, right? If that's what you're looking to do. Utah is really famous for a lot of these other things, such as going outdoors and just having a good family-friendly environment, to really enjoy kind of your day-to-day life. So if you're looking for nightlife, Utah, of course we do have bars, we do have clubs. There are things out there, right, that you can still go do, but it's not going to be anything compared to Vegas or compared to, even Los Angeles or New York or Miami or any of these other major cities that are going to have a much wider variety of, that nightlife. So just something to point out there. And the next point I want to make with that actually coincides pretty closely. Here in Utah, we only have a couple of professional sports teams, right? I know there's a lot of people out there who are way into sports. We do have the Utah Jazz for basketball, and we do have Real Salt Lake, which is considered a major league soccer team. But when it comes to the other major sports franchises or different types of sports, right? You've got football, you've got baseball, and you've got hockey. Unfortunately, we don't have a major team when it comes to those sports. So that might be something that you're kind of lacking on. Just a quick little con that I wanted to point out. Next up, we have public transportation. So public transportation here in Utah is not the best, right? If you're coming from a small town out in the middle of nowhere, public transportation is going to be way better than you're used to. But if you're coming from a major city like San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Miami, Denver, any of these other major cities that are further along in their economic development, the public transportation in those cities is going to be significantly better than we have here in Utah. We do have public transportation. We do have buses. We do have tracks, light rail lines. We have the Front Runner, which is kind of a high-speed train. So there are ways to get around, but honestly, I'd say for most people, it's probably just not an economical or viable choice because it just takes too long. Things are too spread out to have it really make sense. If you're lucky enough to work in an office building that's right next to one of these train stops, then sure, you could probably do it. But for most people, probably not the most economical thing just based on the scarcity of it overall. And again, a coinciding point with that is that the travel here in Utah is not great. Now, let me explain what I actually mean by that. If you live here in Salt Lake and you're trying to travel to other parts of the country, it can be done, but it's going to be a long distance, right? This is much different. Let's just say you're up in the Northeast, right? If you're in Boston, you can get to New York, you can get to New Jersey, you can get to Washington, D.C., you can get to all of these northeastern cities within a couple hours drive or a flight, right? Here in Utah, you're really kind of spread out. The next major city, I think, is going to be Boise, which is about 4.5 hours north. You've got Vegas, which is about 6 hours south. You have, Reno and California, about 10 hours to the west, depending on where you're going. And then you're going to have Denver, which is about, 8 or 9 hours to the east from Salt Lake. So when it comes to driving, traveling is a bit further. Some people don't really care about this because they're going to fly to those destinations anyway. But if you're looking to go on these like weekend trips driving, you're probably going to be staying within the state or at least some of the surrounding states for most of those trips. Now, another con to the weather, although I was touting the weather and the great seasons that we have here, one of the cons that you will find that I briefly mentioned was that the spring and fall months are actually very short. We have a low number of days where the weather is really nice, sitting between, let's say, like 55 degrees and 85 degrees on the high end, right? You really only get small periods of that during the spring and fall months, but those periods seem to be so incredibly short. It'll go from being really, really hot to snowing in a very short amount of time. So probably from about April, April and May, you'll get some good weather. And then in about the month of, maybe end of September through October, you'll get some pretty good weather. And that's about it, right? So you're going to be on one end of the extreme or the other for most of the year. You're either going to be really hot or really cold in winter. So that's just kind of something I wanted to point out here. There's a low number of days in that good weather range between, like, let's say 55 and 85 degrees. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is another potential con, which I do think is actually kind of switching around and becoming a positive. I do think we're going to see some massive changes with this over the next couple of years, over the next couple of decades. But right now, the diversity that we have here in Utah, is not going to be the most diverse. Let's just put it that way, right? I'm not going to go into specifics about what that actually actually entails. But if you look at the demographics of the people who live here in Utah, you're going to see that there's a couple majorities that really kind of take over the state, whether that's politically, whether that's racially, whether that's religious. There's going to be a number of people who fall into one of those majorities that kind of, have a really wide majority here in the state. So again, if you're coming from another major city where it's going to be incredibly diverse, you might be used to some diversity as far as these different backgrounds that people have. But here in Utah, you're going to find less of that. So that is currently something that made the cons list here today. I do think that will kind of turn around. I'm having tons of people move into the state, people from all different backgrounds, whether it's ethnicity, race, politics, religion, whatever it is. There's people moving into the state, and that's providing more and more diversity on a regular basis. And if you're thinking about making that move here to Utah, make sure to reach out to me, call, text, or email anytime. I absolutely love hearing from you guys. I've helped hundreds of people over the last couple of years make a move right here to Utah. I want to be your trusted real estate resource when it comes to moving to Utah. With that being said, thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.